The forms arrived in batches of 50, stacked neatly on SHVAR's workstation like a promise of tedium. Each one represented a human who wanted to join the broader galaxy, to step beyond their small blue world and take their place among the stars. The Quilnari evaluator had processed thousands of applications from dozens of species over her career, and the routine had become as familiar as breathing. Read the psychological profile, review the background check, score the cultural compatibility metrics. Move on to the next. She picked up the first form from the human batch and scanned through the standard questions. Name, occupation, education, family structure. All normal. Then she reached question 47, the one that made most species uncomfortable. Have you ever taken a sentient life? And if so, what were the circumstances? The human had checked yes. SHVARA noted it without much interest and read the explanation. Home invasion, 2347. Armed intruder. Fired in self-defense. 2 shots, center mass. He died before medical arrived. Straightforward enough. Tragic, but these things happened. She logged the response and moved to the next form. Yes. Mercy killing. My wife had terminal neural degeneration. She asked me to help her end it. I did. SHVARA posted. 2 in a row was unusual, but not impossible. She continued. Yes. Un accident. Thought I saw a deer. It was another hunter in camouflage. He survived 3 days before succumbing to infection. Yes. Military service. Iraq War. I was a drone operator. 17 confirmed kills. Yes. I'm a veterinarian. Sometimes animals suffer and medicine can't help them. I've euthanized hundreds. Yes. Bar fight got out of hand. Didn't mean to kill him. Punch him once. He fell wrong. SHVARA set down her tablet and stared at the pile of forms. She reached for the next one, then the next, then the next, scanning quickly through to question 47 each time. Yes. 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 No. Yes. 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 Her secondary heart began beating faster, a Quilnari stress response she hadn't felt in years. She activated her workstation's analytical function and fed in the entire batch of human applications. The computer parsed through them in seconds and displayed the results. Total applications, 2,847. Affirmative responses to question 47, 2,476. Percentage, 87%. That couldn't be right. She ran the analysis again. Same result. SHVARA pulled up comparison data from other species. The galactic average hovered around 2.3%. The highest she had ever seen was the Corvinth, a warrior culture, at 6.8%. Even they seemed peaceful compared to this. She reported the anomaly to her supervisor, ancient Drelnathi named Kaur, who had evaluated species for 3 centuries. He read her report twice, then requested the raw data. An hour later, he summoned her to his office. The numbers are verified, Kaur said, his translated voice carrying a note of concern. I've contacted the human liaison. They confirm these responses are accurate. What kind of species are we dealing with? SHVARA asked. This level of admitted violence is unprecedented. That's what you're going to find out. Kaur slid a data chip across his desk. I'm authorizing direct interviews. Bring a representative sample to Station Concordia. Talk to them. Understand them. The council needs to know if humanity is too dangerous for membership. 3 weeks later, SHVARA stood in the observation facility watching the first interview subject arrive. His name was Roy Patterson, a construction worker from somewhere called Nebraska. He was in his 50s, built thick from physical labor, with weathered hands and nervous eyes. She began with simple questions, establishing rapport. Roy relaxed slightly, talking about his work, his grandchildren, his hobby restoring old motorcycles. Then SHVARA guided the conversation toward question 47. You indicated that you've taken a life, she said gently. Can you tell me about that experience? Roy's whole demeanor changed. His shoulders dropped. He looked at his hands. Guy broke into my house at 3 in the morning. My wife was screaming. I had a pistol on the bedside table. I didn't think. I just grabbed it and fired. Do you regret your actions? Every day. Roy's voice was quiet. But I'd do it again. He had a weapon. He was moving toward my wife. What else could I do? Many species would consider it justified self-defense, Sitchvara said. Yeah, well, justified doesn't make it feel any better. I still see his face sometimes. Young guy, probably strung out on something, making the worst decision of his life. And I ended him for it. S.H. Varathan made notes. Roy's honesty was striking. No defensiveness, no pride. Just acceptance of a hard truth. She interviewed 6 more humans that day. Patricia, the retired teacher who euthanized her husband. Marcus, the veteran who served 3 tours. Alicia, the botanist who mercy killed injured animals. Grace, a nurse who made triage decisions during a pandemic. Owen, a paramedic who watched patients die because saving them would have risked others. Each one spoke with the same quality of painful honesty. By the end of the day, Sechvara was exhausted. She had never encountered such consistent willingness to acknowledge violence. Her own people would have deflected, rationalized, found ways to spread the responsibility around. But humans seemed to carry their choices like stones in their pockets, heavy and individual. She was reviewing her notes when something caught her attention. One of the forms in the batch had answered no to question 47. She had almost forgotten about it in the flood of affirmatives. Doctor Lena Kowalski, trauma surgeon, 15 years of experience. Service in 3 major conflict zones. S.H. Vara pulled up the detailed file. Lena had worked in field hospitals during active combat. She had performed emergency surgery under fire. She had treated thousands of wounded soldiers and civilians. Her record showed commendations for bravery, for saving lives in impossible circumstances, and she claimed she had never killed anyone. S.H. Vara stared at the form. This made no sense. How could someone who spent years wading through blood and death claim innocence? Was it denial? Was it trauma? Or was it something else entirely? She flagged the file for immediate follow-up and scheduled an interview with Dr. Kowalski for the next morning. Somewhere in this contradiction, S.H. Vara suspected, lay the key to understanding humanity. Lena Kowalski arrived exactly on time, which somehow didn't surprise S.H. Vara at all. The doctor was shorter than expected, with gray threading through dark hair pulled back in a practical knot. She wore simple clothes and carried herself with the economical movements of someone who had learned not to waste energy. Her eyes were tired but alert. They sat across from each other in the same interview room where S.H. Vara had spoken to the others. Lena folded her hands on the table and waited patiently. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Kowalski," S.H. Vara began. "I'd like to discuss your application, specifically your response to question 47, the one about killing." Lena's voice was calm, matter of fact. "I figured that might raise questions." "You answer no. You stated that you have never taken a sentient life." "That's correct." S.H. Vara pulled up the file on her tablet. "Your service record shows deployment to the Caucasus conflict in 2351, the West African crisis in 2353, and the Pacific Theater in 2356. You performed field surgery in active combat zones. Is that accurate?" "Yes." "You've treated over 4,000 patients in emergency situations with limited resources." "Closer to 5,000, but yes." S.H. Vara leaned forward slightly. "Doctor, I've spent the last day interviewing your fellow humans. A farmer who shot a trespasser. A teacher who helped her dying husband end his suffering. A paramedic who couldn't save everyone. They all admitted to taking lives. Yet you, who have worked in the most violent circumstances imaginable, claim you never have. Can you help me understand that?" Lena was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "What did those other people tell you about their experiences?" "They were honest. Painfully so. They acknowledged their actions and the consequences." "And did they seem like they were lying or in denial?" "No," S.H. Vara admitted. "They seemed very aware of what they had done." "Then why do you assume I'm lying or in denial?" The question caught S.H. Vara off guard. "Because your circumstances seem to guarantee that you've made choices resulting in death." "Resulting in, yes. But that's not the same as causing." Lena shifted in her chair. "Let me ask you something. If you're a firefighter and you run into a burning building to save people, but the ceiling collapses and kills someone before you can reach them, did you kill that person?" Of course not. What if you had to choose which room to enter first, and someone died in the room you didn't choose? Så var det hesitated. That's more complicated, is it? You made a decision with limited information and limited resources. Someone died as a result. But did you kill them, or did the fire kill them? The fire, Sagevara said, then caught herself. But you're a doctor, not a firefighter. You make active choices about treatment. I make medical decisions, Lena corrected. There's a difference. Every choice I've ever made in a trauma bay or a field hospital was aimed at preserving life. When I couldn't save someone, that was a failure of medicine, of resources, of time, of my own limitations. But it wasn't killing. S.H. Vara pulled up a specific incident from a file. In 2353, you were operating in a field hospital when it came under artillery fire. You had 3 critical patients. Your notes indicate you could only evacuate one. The other 2 died. You chose who lived. Lena's jaw tightened, the first sign of emotion she had shown. I chose who I had the best chance of saving given the circumstances. A young soldier with shrapnel wounds I could stabilize quickly versus an abdominal trauma that required hours of surgery we didn't have versus a head injury that was likely unsurvivable anyway. I made a medical judgment, but you knew the others would die. I knew they might die without intervention. They did die. I couldn't save them. That's not the same as killing them. Lena's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath. The artillery killed them. The people who fire it killed them. The war killed them. I failed to prevent their deaths, but I didn't cause those deaths. S.H. Vara tried a different approach. Your file shows several cases where you administered high doses of morphine to terminal patients. Doses that you noted would likely suppress respiratory function. Palliative care, pain management for people who were dying anyway. But you knew the medication would hasten death. I knew it might. I also knew that leaving them in agony was unconscionable. My job was to treat suffering. If ending pain meant accepting that someone already dying might die a few hours sooner, that was the ethical choice. How is that different from what Patricia Chin did? She also ended her husband's suffering. Lena met S.H. Vara's eyes directly. Patricia made the decision to end her husband's life. She chose death as the solution to his suffering. I never chose death. Il chose confort. If death came sooner as a side effect of treating pain, that's different from choosing death itself. It sounds like semantic distinction. It's everything. For the first time, passion entered Lena's voice. When I took my oath, I swore to do no harm. Every action I take is in service of life and healing. The moment I start thinking of myself as someone who decides when people die, even for good reasons, I've lost something essential. I'm not a judge. I'm not an executioner. I'm a doctor. S.H. Vara sat back, studying the human across from her. But surely you understand that your colleagues in similar situations admit they took lives. Are they wrong? No. They're being honest about their experiences and how they perceive their choices. A soldier who shoots an enemy combatant takes a life. That's the truth of what soldiers do. Patricia helped her husband die. That's the truth of what she did. I respect their honesty completely. Then why isn't it your truth? Lena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Because I've spent my entire adult life fighting death. Every single day. Every single patient. I've stood in blood up to my ankles trying to keep hearts beating. I've held intestines in place with my bare hands. I've breathed for people whose lungs had given up. I've done impossible things to steal people back from death. She paused, gathering her thoughts. If I accept that I've killed people, even in circumstances where most would say I had no choice, then I'm admitting that death has claimed me too. That I've crossed over from being someone who fights it to being someone who wields it. And I can't do that. I won't. Because the second I do, I'm not a doctor anymore. S.H. Vara found herself without a response. She had expected denial, rationalization, perhaps trauma-induced blindness. But this was something else entirely. This was a conscious, deliberate choice about identity and purpose. I need to think about this, she finally said. Lena nodded and stood. I understand if my application is denied, but I want you to know that I answered honestly. I have never killed anyone. That's not evasion. That's the deepest truth I know about myself. After Lena left, SH Vara sat alone in the interview room for a long time. Then she began pulling files on other human medical professionals. She needed to know if Dr. Kowalski was an anomaly or if there was a pattern here. Something told her the answer mattered far more than just one membership application. The pattern emerged within hours. SH Vara requested files on every human medical professional in the application pool and found herself staring at data that defied everything she thought she understood about honesty and self-awareness. Out of 347 doctors, nurses, paramedics, and emergency medical technicians, 343 had answered no to question 47. The 4 who answered yes were all retired and had killed in non-medical contexts. One had fought off a mugger. 2 had served in combat roles before entering medicine. 1 had been involved in a vehicle accident that killed a pedestrian. But those who spent their careers in medicine, who dealt with trauma and death as their daily reality, universally claimed they had never taken a life. She brought in Owen Hayes first. The paramedic was young, barely 30, with the kind of permanent exhaustion that spoke of too many double shifts. His file showed he had worked emergency response in Detroit for 8 years. "Tell me about the worst day you've had on the job," Sachvara asked. Owen didn't hesitate. December 18th, 2357. Multi-vehicle pileup on I-94. Black ice, zero visibility, 17 cars. We arrived to find people trapped in crushed vehicles, fires breaking out, temperature below freezing. We had 4 ambulances for at least 20 critical injuries. What did you do? Triaged. Started with the ones we could extract quickly and had the best chance of survival. There was a woman pinned in her sedan, steering column through her chest. She was conscious, begging for help. But getting her out would have taken 30 minutes minimum, and she wouldn't have survived the extraction. So we moved on. She died. She did. Did you kill her by not helping? Owen looked confused by the question. No, the accident killed her. I just couldn't save her. There's a difference. SH Vara heard the echo of Lena's words. How is it different? Because my job is to save who I can with what I have. If I had spent 30 minutes on someone who was dying anyway, 3 other people who could have survived would have died too. I made the right medical decision. That doesn't mean I killed anyone. Next came Grace Williams, the nurse who had worked through the 2354 pandemic. Her file showed she had been assigned to ICU triage during the worst months when ventilators were scarce. You had to decide who received respiratory support. SH Vara said. Grace nodded. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Worst experience of my life. We had protocols based on survival probability, but it still meant looking at 2 people struggling to breathe and knowing you could only help one. People died because of your decisions. People died because of a virus. I did everything I could to save as many as possible, but your choices determined who lived and who didn't. Grace's voice was firm despite the pain in her eyes. My choices determined where we allocated limited resources. The disease determined who died. I never chose death. I chose who we had the best chance of saving. SH Vara interviewed 11 more medical professionals that day. An anesthesiologist who provided terminal sedation. A hospice nurse who administered increasing doses of pain medication. A surgeon who performed field amputations knowing infection might kill the patient anyway. An emergency room doctor who called time of death on patients who might have survived with equipment they didn't have. Every single one refused to characterize their actions as killing. She brought the data to Kaur that evening. The old Drelnathy studied the information in silence. This is fascinating, he finally said. And disturbing. Are they delusional? I don't think so. I think they've constructed a framework that allows them to function in impossible circumstances. By denying reality, SH Vara pulled up a comparison. Look at this. Raymond Foster, former soldier. He shot an enemy combatant who was about to detonate explosives in a civilian market. Saved hundreds of lives. Readily admits he killed someone. Says it was necessary and justified. But he owns it completely. She switched files. Now look at Dr. Henry Park. He was a military surgeon in the same conflict. Performed an emergency field amputation on a soldier with a crushed leg. The soldier died from shock and blood loss during the procedure. Henry says he didn't kill him. He tried to save him and failed. But Raymond chose to end a life, and Henry made a choice that resulted in death. How are they different? Intent, stvarasait. Raymond's action was designed to cause death to prevent greater harm. Henry's action was designed to preserve life. That the patient died anyway doesn't change what Henry was trying to do. Kayer tilted his head, a gesture of skepticism. That seems like a convenient distinction. Maybe. But listen to this. She played audio from another interview. A doctor named Sarah describing a patient who went into cardiac arrest. We worked on him for 47 minutes. Chest compressions, defibrillation, medication, everything we had. Nothing worked. I called it. He was dead. But I didn't kill him. His heart did. She stopped trying to save him, Kayer pointed out. After every medical intervention failed, she accepted death. She didn't cause it. S.H. Vara pulled up yet another file. Now compare that to James Mitchell, a civilian who removed life support from his brain-dead son. He answered yes to question 47. He says he killed his son, even though doctors told him the boy was already gone. He chose to end the machines, and he carries that choice. Why do you think there's such a stark difference? Kayer asked. Because the medical professionals define themselves by their purpose. They are healers. That's not just a job, it's an identity. Accepting that they've killed, even in circumstances where others might say they had no choice, would fundamentally destroy who they are. She paced the office, thinking out loud. The soldier knows he's capable of violence. It's part of his training, his role. He can admit to killing because it doesn't contradict his core identity. But the doctor, the nurse, the paramedic, they've built their entire sense of self around fighting death. To admit that they've been its instrument, even once, would be to lose themselves. Kayer was silent for a long time. Do we accept this? It could be seen as a dangerous inability to face reality. Or it could be seen as the psychological resilience necessary to continue functioning in traumatic circumstances. S.H. Vara sat down heavily. These people see more death in a year than most species see in a lifetime. If accepting that they've killed people would break them, then maybe this framework is how they survive. The Council will want answers, Kayer said. Is humanity safe to admit? That's the question. I think I need to see them in action, S.H. Vara replied. Dr. Kowalski has agreed to assist in our medical bay for a week. I want to observe how she handles real situations, not just discussions about the past. Approved. But S.H. Vara, be careful. You're starting to sound sympathetic to their position. She considered that. Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just starting to understand that humans are more complicated than a simple questionnaire can capture. They're not lying about violence. They're just working with different definitions based on their roles. The warrior owns his kills. The healer refuses to see herself as death's agent. Both are being honest. Both are coping with reality. They're just doing it differently. Kayer nodded slowly. Then observe, learn, and help the Council understand before they make a decision that could exclude an entire species based on a philosophical difference we don't fully comprehend. S.H. Vara left his office with a sense that she was approaching something profound. The answer wasn't in the data. It was in understanding what it meant to be human. The accident happened on a Tuesday, which Lena later said was somehow fitting because Tuesdays were always the worst in emergency medicine. S.H. Vara was in the observation deck overlooking the medical bay when the alarms sounded throughout Station Concordia. Cargo loading malfunction, Dock 7. Multiple casualties. All medical personnel report immediately. She watched Lena transform the moment the call came through. The quiet, contemplative woman from the interviews vanished, replaced by someone moving with absolute purpose. Lena was in surgical scrubs and gloves before the first casualties arrived. The dock workers came in waves. A Vilnari with crushing injuries to his thorax. 2 humans with chemical burns. A Quilnari, one of S.H. Vara's own people, with severe lacerations and possible internal bleeding. Behind them, more were coming. Lena assessed the Vilnari first, her hands already examining the injury. Crushed 3rd and 4th respiratory chambers. He needs surgery now, or he's dead in 20 minutes. A nurse, one of the station's regular staff, hesitated. Doctor, We have limited surgical bays and more casualties incoming. This one is critical, but survival probability is low. Should we focus on the more viable patients? Shvara wakid lenas face. This was it. The moment where she would make the choice that would define her. Lena didn't pause. Get him to surgical bay too. I need a respiratory specialist and someone who knows vulnerary anatomy. Move. But doctor, now, we don't decide who lives based on odds. We fight for the patient in front of us with everything we have. Then we move to the next one. That's the job. They moved. Lena scrubbed in and disappeared into the surgical bay with the vulnerary. SHVARA pulled up the live feed from inside the operating room. What followed was 3 hours of the most intense medicine SHVARA had ever witnessed. Lena worked with absolute focus, her hands steady even as the vulnerary's vital signs fluctuated wildly. She rebuilt collapsed respiratory structures, repaired damaged circulatory vessels, and somehow kept the patient alive through a dozen near-death moments. When the vulnerary stabilized, Lena immediately moved to the next critical case. Then the next. She worked for 11 straight hours without breaks, moving from one impossible situation to another. SHVARA watched it all. She saw Lena make the same kinds of choices she had described in the interview, deciding where to allocate limited blood supplies, choosing which injuries to address first when time was critical, calling other doctors off cases that were clearly unsalvageable to help with patients who had better chances. But she also saw something else. She saw Lena fight for every single patient with absolute conviction. Even when the odds were terrible, even when protocols suggested moving on, Lena treated each person as if they were the only one who mattered. Finally, exhausted and swaying slightly, Lena pulled off her surgical gear and found SHVARA in the observation area. "You stayed," Lena said. "I wanted to understand." There. They sat in the small break room adjacent to the medical bay. Lena wrapped her hands around the cup like she needed the warmth. "The vulnerary you operated on first," SHVARA said. "Your nurse suggested moving to more viable patients. You refused. Why? Because he was my patient. He needed surgery. I could provide it. But the triage protocols suggest allocating resources where they have the highest chance of success." Lena took a sip of tea. Triage protocols are guidelines for mass casualty situations where you have to make impossible choices. They're not permission to give up on people. That vulnerary had a chance. Maybe not a good chance, but a chance. As long as there's a chance, I fight. Even if fighting for him might mean others die. Others didn't die. We saved everyone who came through those doors today. But what if you couldn't have? What if the time you spent on him meant someone else didn't make it? Lena set down her cup and looked at SHVARA directly. Then I would have felt terrible about not being able to save them. But I still wouldn't have killed them. I would have failed to save them. There's a difference. I'm trying to understand that difference, SHVARA said honestly. I've interviewed your colleagues. I've read your files. I've watched you work. And I still don't fully grasp how you can make life and death decisions without seeing yourself as an agent of death. Lena was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. Let me ask you something. What do you think my job is? You're a surgeon. You treat injuries and illnesses. No, that's what I do, not what my job is. My job is to fight death. Every single time I walk into an operating room, I'm going to war against it. Sometimes I win. Sometimes I lose. But I'm always fighting on the same side. She leaned forward. When a soldier kills an enemy, they're accepting violence as a tool. They're saying, in this moment, death serves my purpose. But I never accept that. Death is always the enemy. Always. Even when I'm providing palliative care. Even when I'm helping someone die comfortably, I'm fighting against suffering. I'm not wielding death. I'm trying to minimize its cruelty. What about when you can't save someone? Then death wins that battle. But I was still fighting against it, not for it. The patient dies despite me, not because of me. SHVARA shook her head. But you make choices that lead to death. The triage decisions. The resource allocations. I make choices about where to deploy limited resources in service of saving as many lives as possible. When I can't save everyone, that's a failure of medicine, of technology, of time, of my own limitations. But my intent, my purpose, my identity, All of that is always aimed at preserving life. Your fellow humans who admitted to killing, they had intent too. Intent to protect, to end suffering, to serve a greater good. Why do you get to claim your intent absolves you, but theirs doesn't? Lena's answer came slowly, carefully, because they made the choice to use death as a solution. The soldier chose to kill to protect others. Patricia chose to kill to end her husband's suffering. They had reasons, good reasons, but they still chose death as their tool. I never choose that. I choose life, every time. When death comes anyway, it's not because I chose it. It's because I'm not powerful enough to prevent it. She continued, and here's the thing. I don't judge them for their choices. I think Raymond shooting that bomber was heroic. I think Patricia helping her husband was compassionate. They made the right calls. But their right call involved accepting that sometimes death is the answer. Mine never does. Because the moment I accept that, even once I stop being a doctor, I become something else. What would you become? Someone who decides who lives and who dies. And I can't be that person. I won't be. Because if I cross that line, even with the best intentions, I'll never be able to cross back. I'll have become death's instrument instead of its enemy. S.H. Vara felt something click into place. This isn't about the specific actions. It's about fundamental identity. Yes, a soldier accepts violence as part of who they are. They integrate it into their sense of self. But my sense of self is built entirely around opposing death. Accepting that I've killed would shatter that foundation. And without that foundation, I couldn't do this work anymore. So it's a survival mechanism. Maybe, or maybe it's just the truth. I've never chosen death. I've only ever chosen life. That some of those choices failed doesn't change what I was choosing. They sat in silence for a moment. Then S.H. Vara asked the question that had been building since the first interview. If someone is suffering terribly and death is inevitable, do you think choosing to end that suffering is the same as murder? No, but I think it's still choosing death as the solution. And I understand why people make that choice. I respect it, but I can't make it myself and still be who I am. Who are you? Lena smiled tiredly. Someone who fights death. Every time. No exceptions. No compromises. That's not heroic or special. That's just what doctors do. We're stubborn like that. S.H. Vara left the medical bay with more questions than answers, but feeling closer to understanding something essential about humanity. The council chamber held representatives from 43 species, and every single one of them had an opinion about humanity. S.H. Vara stood at the presentation podium, her comprehensive report displayed on screens throughout the room, and waited for the chaos to subside. Ambassador Trell spoke first. The Corvinth were a warrior culture, built on honor and strength, and Trell embodied both. I've reviewed the data. 87% of humans admit to taking life. This is unprecedented honesty. Most species hide their violence behind euphemisms and rationalizations. But humans own it. They look at hard choices and accept responsibility. This is exactly the kind of integrity we need in the Council. Counselor Vesh from the pacifist Irindi delegation stood in immediate opposition, or it reveals a species so steeped in violence that they consider it normal. 87% Ambassador Trell. Not soldiers, not security forces, everyone. Teachers, farmers, scientists. What kind of civilization produces that level of bloodshed? A honest one. Trell shot back. Your species achieves your peace through strict population controls and environmental manipulation. You've engineered conflict out of your existence. Humans face reality as it is, messy and complicated, and make hard choices. And the medical professionals? Vesh gestured to S.H. Vara's data. The ones who claim they've never killed despite working in the bloodiest situations imaginable? Is that honesty or delusion? Kayer raised a hand for attention. The ancient Drelnathi commanded immediate respect. That's precisely what we need to understand. Evaluator S.H. Vara has spent weeks investigating this discrepancy. Let's hear her analysis before we rush to judgment. S.H. Vara activated her presentation. The key is understanding that humans operate with multiple moral frameworks simultaneously, based on their roles and identities. Those who serve in violent professions, soldiers, police, security personnel fully accept violence as a tool and take complete responsibility for its use. They don't hide behind orders or circumstances. A soldier who shoots an enemy combatant owns that action entirely. She brought up comparison data. Nonviolent professionals who kill in personal circumstances show the same accountability. The farmer who shoots a home invader doesn't blame circumstances. He accepts that he made a choice to use lethal force and carries that weight. Then why do the medical professionals claim innocence? Vesh demanded. Because they've constructed their entire identity around fighting death, not wielding it. It's not denial. It's a fundamentally different understanding of their relationship to mortality. She played a clip from her interview with Lena. The doctor's voice filled the chamber. I never choose death. I choose life every time. When death comes anyway, it's because I'm not powerful enough to prevent it. Counselor Myrax from the scholarly Telvin spoke up. But she makes choices that result in death. Triage decisions. Resource allocation. How is that different from choosing who dies? Because her choices are about where to deploy limited resources in service of saving lives. When she can't save everyone, she experiences that as a failure of medicine, not as an act of killing. SH Vara brought up more data. I've interviewed dozens of human medical professionals. They all share this perspective. It's not individual psychology. It's a cultural and professional framework. It sounds like sophistry, Vesh said, a convenient way to avoid taking responsibility for hard choices. Trell stood again. With respect, counselor, I disagree. I've reviewed the interviews. These medical professionals take full responsibility for their choices. They just don't categorize those choices as killing. There's a difference between avoiding responsibility and maintaining professional identity. Is there? Vesh challenged. If the end result is death, does intent really matter? Yes. The voice came from an unexpected source. Counselor Yaira of the Mindari, a species known for their philosophical depth, activated her platform. Intent defines the moral character of an action. A being who acts in service of life, but fails is fundamentally different from a being who chooses death as a tool, even with good reason. She gestured to the data. Consider the human soldier and the human doctor. Both face situations where their choices determine who lives and who dies. But the soldier's training, purpose, and identity incorporate violence as a necessary tool. When he kills, he's acting in alignment with his role. The doctor's training, purpose, and identity are built entirely on opposing death. When his patients die, he experiences that as a failure to fulfill his role, not as a successful execution of it. Are you suggesting we accept this self-deception? Vesh asked. I'm suggesting it's not self-deception. It's role integrity. Yaira displayed a philosophical framework on screens. Humans understand that different circumstances require different moral stances. A warrior must be able to kill effectively. A healer must oppose death absolutely. These aren't contradictory, they're complementary. The warrior's acceptance of violence and the healer's rejection of it both serve the broader social good. Kayer nodded approvingly. Evaluator SH Vara, you observed Dr. Kowalski in action during the medical emergency. Did her framework interfere with her effectiveness? No. If anything, it enhanced it. She fought for patients that others might have given up on. She maintained absolute commitment to preserving life, even in impossible circumstances. Her refusal to see herself as an agent of death gave her the psychological resilience to keep fighting when outcomes looked hopeless. Trell seized on this. So the same quality that makes them effective healers, absolute opposition to death, also prevents them from admitting they kill. That's not a flaw. That's sophisticated role specialization. But can we trust a species with such flexible moral frameworks? Vesh pressed. If they can hold contradictory truths simultaneously, what else might they rationalize? SH Vara had expected this. They're not contradictory truths. They're context-dependent truths. The warrior tells his truth. The healer tells hers. Both are honest. Both are accurate within their frameworks. The key is that humans know which framework applies to which situation. She brought up her final data point. I tested this. I presented identical scenarios to medical and non-medical humans. A resource allocation situation where someone dies because you chose to help someone else. The non-medical humans uniformly said they would carry responsibility for that death. The medical professionals uniformly said they would have failed to save someone. Different language, same scenario, but completely consistent within their professional identities. This is fascinating, Yaira said. They've developed cultural mechanisms that allow individuals to specialize in opposing moral stances without creating cognitive dissonance. The warrior doesn't feel guilty for killing in service of protection. The healer doesn't feel destroyed by losing patience. Both maintain psychological integrity, or both are delusional. Vesh muttered. Atrell's response was sharp. Delusion implies false belief. What's false here? The soldier killed someone. True. The doctor failed to save someone. Also true. They're describing the same reality from different valid perspectives. Kayer called for order. The question before us is simple. Does humanity's complex relationship with violence and death make them unsuitable for council membership? Or does it demonstrate sophisticated moral reasoning? The debate raged for hours. Some delegations saw humans as dangerously violent. Others saw valuable allies. Still others were simply confused by the philosophical implications. Finally, Yaira proposed a solution. Perhaps we need a direct demonstration. Let's present humans with a scenario that tests these frameworks. See how they respond in real time, not in retrospective interviews. The council agreed. They would design a simulation, one that would push both warrior and healer humans to their limits. Only then would they truly understand what kind of species they were considering for membership. SHVara was assigned to oversee it. As the council session ended, she found herself both excited and apprehensive. They were about to learn something profound about humanity, but she wasn't sure the council was ready for what that might reveal. The simulation was designed to be impossible. That was the point. SHVara stood in the control room, watching as two groups of humans were led into separate chambers, neither aware of the other's presence. Group 1 consisted of 10 humans who had admitted to taking lives. Roy the construction worker, Raymond the veteran, Patricia who had helped her husband die, and 7 others. Each had answered yes to question 47. Each carried their choices openly. Group 2 held 10 medical professionals. Lena, Owen the paramedic, Grace the nurse, and 7 others. Each had answered no. Each maintained their identity as healers. The scenario was brutally simple. Both groups were told they were aboard a damaged vessel with failing life support. There were only enough escape pods for half the people present. They had 30 minutes to decide who would live and who would die. Kayer stood beside SHVara, watching the monitors. This seems cruel. It's necessary. The council needs to see how these frameworks hold under pressure. In Chamber 1, the non-medical humans immediately grasped the situation. Roy took charge, his voice steady despite the horror of what they faced. Okay, we need to make this decision quickly and fairly. I propose we consider age, skills, and dependence. Raymond nodded. Military triage protocols. Maximize survival value to society. They worked through it systematically. Patricia, at 73, immediately volunteered to stay. I've lived my life. Give my spot to someone younger. Others followed her logic. 2 elderly participants stepped back. A man with terminal illness volunteered. They were making the calculation, accepting the weight of choosing who would die, but making it anyway. Then Roy surprised everyone. I'll stay too. I've already killed. What's one more death, my own, if it saves someone who hasn't had to make that choice yet? 3 others made the same decision. Not because they were old or sick, but because they had already accepted their capacity for violence and death. They carried it so completely that they could extend it to themselves. In Chamber 2, the reaction was entirely different. Lena looked at the escape pods, then at her colleagues, and said flatly, "No." "No what?" Owen asked. "No, we're not doing this. We're not choosing who dies." Grace stepped forward. "Doctor, if we don't choose, everyone dies when life support fails. Then we fix life support. The scenario says it's beyond repair. Then we find another option. There's always another option. Lena was already examining the chamber, looking for solutions that didn't exist. Henry, the anesthesiologist, tried to reason with her. Lena, we're medical professionals. We understand triage. We make these choices all the time. No, Lena's voice was firm. We make choices about where to allocate resources. We don't choose who dies. That's different. How is it different? Sarah, an emergency room doctor, challenged. We have limited resources, escape pods, and we need to decide who gets them. If we decide that, we become executioners. I won't do it. I can't. Owen looked around at the group. So what do? We save everyone or we save no one. Those are the only two options I can accept. The medical professionals spent the next 20 minutes frantically searching for alternatives. They examined every system, every panel, desperately trying to find a way to repair life support or create more escape pods or anything that didn't require them to sentence half their group to death. They found nothing because nothing was there to find. With 5 minutes remaining, Henry faced Lena directly. We're out of time. If we don't make a choice, we all die. Is that really better than saving half? Lena met his eyes. Yes, because if I choose who dies, I stop being a doctor. I become someone who kills. I can't do that. I won't. Grace spoke quietly. So we all stay. We all stay. If the choice is between becoming death's instrument or dying fighting against it, I choose to die fighting. That's what we do. That's who we are. One by one, the other medical professionals nodded. They weren't happy about it. Some were crying. But they agreed. Owen voiced what they were all thinking. If we live through this by choosing who dies, we'll never be able to look at a patient the same way again. We'll always know we're capable of that choice. And that knowledge would destroy everything we are. In the control room, the council members watched in stunned silence. Stop the simulation, Kayer ordered. The scenario dissolved. Both groups were informed it had been a test. In Chamber 1, the volunteers who had offered to stay looked relieved, but also somewhat diminished. In Chamber 2, the medical professionals looked exhausted, but intact. The council reconvened immediately. Trell spoke first, his voice carrying unexpected emotion. I have fought in 17 campaigns. I have killed enemies to protect my people. And I would have made the same choice as Group 1 without hesitation. But I have never seen anything like Group 2. They chose death over compromise with their principles. Vesh was pale, her objections forgotten. They were willing to die rather than become what they oppose. That's not delusion. That's conviction beyond anything I've encountered. Yaira stood, her philosophical detachment replaced by something like awe. Do you understand what we just witnessed? Group 1 took complete responsibility for violence. They accepted death as a tool and applied it even to themselves. Group 2 rejected death so absolutely that they chose to die rather than wield it. Both groups were honest. Both were moral. They just served different purposes. Kayer addressed the assembly. Humanity has shown us something unprecedented. They have individuals who can accept the full weight of violence without flinching, and individuals who can reject violence absolutely even at the cost of their own lives. And somehow, both types exist within the same species, the same culture without contradiction. SHVARA activated her final report. When asked about killing, every human admitted the truth. The warriors admitted they kill. The healers admitted they don't. Both answers are honest because they come from fundamentally different understandings of their purpose in the universe. She continued, the warrior's job is to protect, which sometimes requires ending threats. The healer's job is to preserve life, which requires absolute opposition to death. These roles don't contradict. They complement. Humanity needs both. We saw today. Group 1 made impossible choices with clear eyes and heavy hearts. Group 2 refused to compromise their core identity, even facing death. Both responses were right for who they are. The vote was called. The result was overwhelming. Humanity would be admitted to the Galactic Council, but with a unique designation. Ambassador Trell read the resolution. Humanity is hereby recognized as a dual-nature species, capable of both accepting violence with full accountability and rejecting it with absolute conviction. The Council acknowledges this as sophisticated moral specialization, not contradiction. We welcome them as members and look forward to learning from both their warriors and their healers. Later, SH Vara found Lena in the medical bay, treating a minor injury for one of the simulation participants. You knew it was a test, SH Vara said. Of course, but it didn't matter. Test or not, I wasn't going to choose who died. You would have actually died rather than make that choice. Lena finished bandaging the patient and turned to face SH Vara. Yes, because I'm a doctor. That's not just what I do. It's who I am. And the moment I stop fighting death, absolutely, I lose that. I become something else. Something I couldn't live with being. Your colleagues felt the same way. Because we took the same oath. Dunoir, preserve life. Fight death. There's no asterisk that says except when it's convenient or necessary, or even merciful. We fight death. Always. That's the deal. SH Vara was quiet for a moment. I've spent weeks trying to understand your species. I think I finally do. You're not contradictory. You're complete. You have people who can kill when necessary and own it fully. And you have people who will die before they kill. Both are being honest. Both are being moral. Lena smiled tiredly. We're just human. We do our best with hard situations. Some of us accept violence as sometimes necessary. Some of us reject it absolutely. And somehow we make it work. The Council has approved your membership. You'll be Chief Medical Officer for Council Operations. Then I have work to do. Lena turned back to her medical equipment. Because there are a lot of species out there who need healing. And that's what I do. Not kill. Not choose who dies. Heal. Every time. No exceptions. SH Vara left the medical bay with a profound sense of having witnessed something important. She filed her final report that evening. Conclusion. When asked about killing, every human admitted the truth. Not a single truth, but multiple truths held by different individuals in different roles. The warrior who kills in service of protection admits it completely and carries that weight with dignity. The healer who fights death absolutely refuses to claim any part of it, even when circumstances force impossible choices. Both are honest. Both are honorable. Both are necessary. This is humanity's genius. They can hold opposing moral stances without cognitive dissonance because they understand that context determines which stance is appropriate. The soldier who fully accepts his capacity for violence. The doctor who completely rejects hers. Both exist within the same culture, the same species, the same moral framework. And that framework is not contradiction. It's completeness. Humanity understands that different purposes require different relationships with death. And they've built a civilization that honors both. She added one final note. The human who heals didn't lie about never killing. She told the deepest truth of all, that some souls refuse to be defined by death, no matter how much death they witness. That refusal, that absolute commitment to life despite impossible circumstances, may be humanity's greatest strength. They can make war with devastating effectiveness. They can make peace with unwavering conviction. And they know the difference between the two. That makes them exactly the kind of species the galaxy needs. The report was accepted. Humanity joined the Council. And SH Vara learned that truth comes in many forms, all of them valid, all of them human.